Who am I? I'm not concerned with justice, and I mutilate people. I ruin lives. I'm cruel and malicious, and I gather strength with time. The more I'm quoted, the more I'm believed. I flourish at every level of society. My victims are helpless. They cannot protect themselves against me because I have no name and I have no face. To track me down is impossible. The harder you try, the more elusive I become. I'm nobody's friend. Once I tarnish a reputation, it's never the same. I topple governments. I ruin marriages. I destroy careers. I cause heartache. And I leave people sleepless. I wreck churches. And I separate Christians from the body. I spawn suspicion and generate grief. I make innocent people cry on their pillows. Who am I? I'm gossip of the house of Satan, the first of her name, queen of destruction, destroyer of the kingdom, the breaker of hearts, and the mother of hatred. Gossip is destructive. Gossip ruins lives, and it happens so much around us, and it's so subtle that sometimes we don't even realize that it's happening. What is gossip? The Bible describes it in many different ways. We're going to be looking at a number of verses today. Many of them will be in the book of Proverbs. Proverbs chapter 18 verse 8 says the following about gossip. It says, the words of a talebearer are like tasty truffles, and they go down into the inmost body. Someone said, but what if it's true? What if it's true? It's not gossip, right? No, of course not. False. Even if it's true, and even if it's nice, it can still be gossip. Why? Because if I'm telling something, sharing with someone, as we kind of agreed in our pre-discussion, if someone shared something with me and I've shared it with another person, and they were in the room and they heard me sharing it and they would be upset, then that's considered gossip. If I share something that I don't have permission to share from another person, that is considered gossip. In the Bible describes, in the book of Romans, it describes gossip and slander as sisters. There's a close relationship with them. Slander is when we say something about another person that hurts their name intentionally, okay, or hurts their reputation. The word in Greek for the word slander is the word that's oftentimes translated as a backbiter, okay? And the word for gossip, and so yes, gossip actually can happen while a person's in the same room, but usually how does it happen? It happens when two people are sitting next to each other, another person walks in the room and they start talking about them. What do they usually do? They whisper. And the word for gossip that's translated, it's whispers, okay? It's whisperer. So anytime you hear or read in the Bible where it says backbiter, think of a slander. And anytime you read the word whisper, think gossip. People who are talking in the shadows, in the darkness, about others when they don't have an opportunity to know what's being said. In the book of Romans, this link is that a person who whispers behind your back with the intention of hurting you is in fact biting you. In the imagery that St. John Chrysostom gives, he's talking about fasting in one of his homilies. He was the bishop of Constantinople, or modern day Istanbul, in the 4th century. And he says, when you fast, you give up, like you don't eat birds and fish, but what do? He says, you bite your brother. You devour your brother, right? You whisper about them. And so he's saying, like, yes, don't devour this, but also don't devour one another. And that devouring happens when we gossip or slander one another. When we gossip, we usually are intending or impacting evil upon another person. Not always, but oftentimes. And oftentimes it's with the intention of bad-mouthing them. Oftentimes. When we bad-mouth someone with gossip, we bite them or we hurt them behind their backs. The passage here, it describes this person with tallbearers like tasty truffles. A tasty truffle is something that you look at and you're like, you look at it, you have to eat it. You have to devour it. Okay? You have to. Or tasty trifle, tasty trifle. It's also described as a choice morsel. A choice morsel. Something we savor and we enjoy. So what is it with this unhealthy attraction that people have with gossip? I can't tell you, like, a lot of people, they're like, I can't. Someone wants to share something and I can't not listen. And I can't, if someone shares something with me, I can't not share it. It's like there's this unhealthy, like weird attraction, like this sadistic attraction. Most people have a fascination with it. Gossip, I like to think of it as steak and lobster. I'm not much of a chocolate person, but I love steak and lobster. If I go to a steak restaurant and they have like a nice porterhouse on there, I can keep on going. Even when I'm like, I've had enough. Same with lobster. I can keep on going. I got to have a little bit more. It's like a box of Pringles. Once you pop, can't stop, right? You just got to keep going. Work your way through it. You know you shouldn't eat the entire container, but you can't stop. You can't. It's like going to an all-you-can-eat sushi place. At least once a year, I go to all-you-can-eat sushi, and after every time, say the same thing. I'm never coming back to all-you-can-eat sushi again. Every time. Until the next time when I forget and I go back again, and I'm like, I walk out and I feel sick. It's like my mom's tray of baklava. Her baklava. Oh my goodness. So good. So good. One Thanksgiving I was in Texas visiting, and my mom brought out a whole tray of baklava. My brother and I ate. We devoured the entire tray. We left like 2 pieces. Okay? My mom was like, what happened to the baklava? My brother looked at me and pointed at me because he knew she wouldn't yell at me. You just can't get enough of it. You got to have more. You always got to have more. There's this really weird attraction that some people have with gossip. I want to distinguish, though, for you between 3 things, because this question was also asked to me a couple weeks ago. The difference between gossiping, venting, and seeking counsel. Because sometimes, like, there's something that you've heard and you need to be able to distinguish between those 3 things. Let's start with seeking counsel. Seeking counsel. Proverbs chapter 12, verse 15. Solomon says, the way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but he who needs counsel is wise. Let's assume you've heard someone has come to you, or something has happened, you've had a conflict with another person, and you are sitting there and you're like ready to explode. What seems right in your own eyes might be a foolish thing to do. And so what you might say is like, I know my temper, I need to go seek counsel from someone about how to respond to this situation. Proverbs 19 verse 20 says, listen to counsel and receive instruction that you may be wise in your later days, or your latter days. The idea of seeking counsel from a priest, a counselor, or a wise, and that like put underline and bold, like 48 font, bold, the word wise, friend or family. The goal here is seeking healthy relationships and seeking healing for yourself and the relationship dynamic. The advantage of seeking counsel is that it allows you to sort out your feelings, to gain objectivity, and you're doing so with the understanding that it is with someone who will maintain confidentiality. Now this is different than going to someone who you know has loose lips and saying, let me just share something with you, I need your advice, and then you sit there and like gossip about them, and then at the very end you say, but don't tell nobody. right? And you know what they're going to do. As soon as you hang up the phone or they walk away, they're going to pick up the phone and they're going to shoot it. You're never going to believe what I just heard, right? So the idea here is you are seeking counsel from someone that you know will maintain confidentiality. That's a person that can remain objective, non-judgmental when they hear something like that. I'm always like convicted or convinced when someone comes to me and they share something with me and they say, well, just don't take the wrong idea about the person. I say, I never would. There's always two sides of the story. And actually there's usually three sides of the story. Your side, their side, and the truth somewhere in the middle, right? And so sometimes, like, if you are a person who is counseling others, it's really necessary to maintain that level of objectivity. Otherwise, it can very quickly descend into gossip. Number two is you're not necessarily seeking counsel, but you just need to vent it out. This may not require counsel this may be a day-to-day basis. It's a close friend who you trust also. They are going to maintain confidentiality. But I want to give you three rules that will help you to avoid gossip when it comes to venting. Number one is be thoughtful about who you vent to. Be thoughtful. Be considerate. Okay? Choose someone who's mature and objective. Choose someone who's mature and objective. Whenever possible, talk to someone who's unrelated to the person with whom you're upset. Because then you put that person in a really unhealthy place that could cause conflict between them or cause what they call triangulation. Right? The person gets stuck in the middle of this triangulation or this relationship dynamic. This might be a friend, a prayer partner, or someone counselors who can have that understanding of confidentiality and objectivity. Number two is clarify the purpose from the very beginning. Okay? Sometimes we just need someone to vent to who can maintain confidentiality. You just need a listening ear. And sometimes just as you're speaking, you realize you're like, you know the answer. You know the answer. It's funny, like when I counsel young couples, I tell them oftentimes, say usually to the guy, like when your wife comes to you and she's venting, like she's not looking for you to fix it. She knows the solution. If she wants the solution, she'll give it to you. Okay? Sometimes she just needs to vent it out and speak it. And that goes regardless either way. Okay? Sometimes we just need someone who's a listening ear that can allow us to listen as we process what's inside of us. And other times we need a little bit of input. We need someone to tell us you're overreacting. You're taking this a little bit too personally. Perhaps that's not the way they meant it. Or if I was in your shoes, I might see it a little bit differently. A good friend will be honest with us. But we also, if we're willing to vent to others and expecting others to let us vent to them and not gossip about others, is we have to allow them to also be objective in their response to us. Because sometimes what we do is we say, I'm just venting, but really what we want is someone to validate and tell us what you're feeling is absolutely right and the person was wrong and how could they and how dare they, and we kind of go at it. And perhaps, sure, they might be wrong. But if we disagree with someone, with what they share, sometimes they're like, I don't want to talk to that person again. They didn't feel me. They didn't validate me. Right? So this is the difference between counsel, venting, and the third one, which is gossiping. Number three is avoid talking to someone with similar problems. So if you're going to vent to someone, like, the old saying, misery loves company? Like, if you go to someone who's in the same exact situation, sometimes that's not the best idea, right? It's not the best advice. Because if you're in the midst of a situation where you're like angry about something, and you're inside of it, and you can't see clearly, and then you go to talk to someone else who's in the midst of the same exact situation, what do you think their ability to see clearly is going to be? Does that make sense? So it's not to say that someone who hasn't been through a similar experience perhaps years ago and has found healing and has worked it out and worked through things can't be a person that you can go and vent to and seek counsel from. But not when you're in the same exact situation. Sometimes that's a really, that just inflames the situation more. Number 3 is crossing the line into gossiping. When venting or seeking counsel crosses the line. There's 2 points I want you to think about for this one. Number 1 is consider what you're saying. Okay? Consider what it is that you're sharing about the other person. Sharing info about another person that's not rightfully yours to share is gossiping. So for instance, someone has told me that they're pregnant or they're expecting a baby. That's great news. It's wonderful news. If I run home or I get on the phone, I start messaging people and tell them, that's gossiping, right? It's not my news to share. If someone is in the midst of a hardship, financial hardship, a relationship hardship, that's not my information to share, okay? Number 2, it is why does the other person that I'm speaking with, why do they need to hear this information? Is there any benefit or reason that they need to hear whatever it is I'm about to share with that person? Let me give you an example. There are times when it's appropriate to share information that's less than flattering about another person. For example, a family member borrowed money from you. They spent it on drugs. This is an extreme example, okay? They spent it on drugs. Now they're looking to other family members and letting them know your experience may benefit everyone. May benefit the person from giving them, may benefit the person who's asking, right? Sharing with a specific person who's being asked, that's, you're offering counsel that's going to help that person. Now if you start going around talking to everyone about that, that might be considered gossiping, right? Unless if that person is going around asking everyone for money. It's also the how and the what's being shared. Does that make sense? Okay, guys, this requires quite a bit of discernment. The intention is always and should always be to warn and not to detract or gossip about the other person. It should always be done with love and in privacy when possible. When possible. One of the ways that Christians find very creatively to gossip is they'll go and talk to another person. They'll say, let me tell you all about what's going on, and and they'll go through a whole story, and then at the very end they'll say, but be sure you pray about the person. Right? That's like a really Christian way to gossip. We got to pray that Jesus get into their heart. If they turn, it's like, you didn't have to share all of that. You could simply say, you know, please pray for so-and-so because they're going through some stuff, you know. If really the intention is to pray and to lift a person up, you can simply say they're going through some things, please pray about the other person. If you're pressed and asked, and guys, this happens with me all the time. People press me all the time. They're like, so what is it? And I'm like, I'm really not at liberty to share. But please just pray for them. They'll say, oh, so-and-so, I noticed like they seem like really, like a lot on their face. They seem like they're carrying a lot. Or they seem like heavy-hearted. They're just going through stuff. Please just pray for them. It's not my right to share. I'm not at liberty to share. Okay? It's a famous pastime of a lot of people to share with others. I read a story that kind of depicted the savagery of gossip. It was about a woman who once repeated a nasty piece of gossip about a friend. The news traveled all over the town very quickly, and soon everyone knew about this nasty news. The woman's friend was very deeply hurt, and not only about the untruths, some of it was true, some of it was untrue, but about the fact that her friend betrayed her. The woman who first passed on the gossip also was wounded, and she felt the guilt of what she had done to her friend. And so she went and she approached her grandfather. And this man was a person that she felt was always very wise. And she said, I've hurt this person, I've hurt my friend very closely. What do you advise me to do? And he said to her, I want you to go buy a chicken and have it killed. And then I want you to take the feathers, and on your way to work, I want you to spread the feathers. And then come back and talk to me. And she said, okay. So she went and did that. And then she came back and he said, now I want you to go collect all the feathers. And so she went around searching for all the feathers. And she came back and she said it was impossible. And he said, exactly. Once you've spoken a word, you can't get it back. It scatters all over the place. And there's no recovering your words. When we've spoken a word that's hurtful about another person, we can never get it back. It blows around and it reaches different ears, and oftentimes it reaches in different forms. 4 different ways that gossip affects people. Number 1 is gossip corrupts. Has a very corrupting or poisonous characteristic or nature. It corrupts our hearts, our souls, and our minds, and it also corrupts others, the ones who are hearing it. Number 2 is gossip can be incredibly destructive. In the book of James, and by the way, we're going to be starting a series on starting next Sunday. We'll be going through the epistle, 1 chapter a week. But in James chapter 3, it's a very powerful passage about the power of the tongue. And St. James describes the tongue in the following way. He says, the tongue is a fire. It's a world of iniquity. The tongue is so set among our members that it defiles the whole body and sets on fire the course of nature. And it's set on fire by hell. For every kind of beast and bird, reptile and creature of the sea has been tamed by mankind, but no man can tame the tongue. And he says the following, it's really powerful. He says it's an unruly evil full of deadly poison. Okay, it can be gossip can be incredibly destructive. Our tongue can be used very powerfully to build and to praise and to edify, but it can also be used powerfully to destroy and to hurt one another and our relationships. Number 3 is that gossip is a characteristic of an unbeliever. It is a characteristic, let me be very clear. Gossip is a characteristic of someone who does not believe in God. And where do I get that from? In the book of Romans, chapter 1, St. Paul lists out, he goes through and he says that there is a group of people that God had given them up to their debased mind. And he starts listing a number of sins that define someone who is an unbeliever. And amongst them he says the following. He says, being filled with all unrighteousness, sexual immorality, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy. Listen to what they're all linked with. Murder, strife, deceit, evil-mindedness. They are whisperers and backbiters. Okay? It is a sign, it is a characteristic of an unbeliever. And number 4 is gossip is divisive. Proverbs 16 verse 28. A perverse man sows strife, and a whisperer separates the best of friends. A whisperer separates the best of friends. Always remember, person who will gossip to you will gossip about you. Okay? Gossip destroys friendships. It separates families, and it can cause chaos in churches. Well, so what's the solution to gossip? I've got 5 points, and then we'll have some time of discussion. Number 1 is learn to overlook an offense. To overlook an offense means that we have to rise above, okay? Which is a sign that we are spiritually maturing. We're rising up. Proverbs chapter 17 verse 9. He who covers a transgression seeks love, but he who repeats a matter separates friends. If someone transgresses against me and I go and I repeat it to another, I'm causing division. A kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. A kingdom divided against. So number 1 is we learn to overlook and cover the transgression. Okay? Number 2 is don't listen to gossipers. Don't listen to gossipers. I know it's a very difficult one. I actually had at one point to tell a family member, I said, I understand, I don't want to hear this. I can't. And this was an elder. And I said, I'm not really comfortable hearing this. And they got really upset. They said, why? And I said, because this is gossip. And they got really offended. And about 6 months later, they said, you know what? You were absolutely right. Shouldn't have, okay? But you can refuse. You can say, honestly, I'm not really comfortable hearing that. I don't feel like I need to listen to words about that person. He who goes about as a talebearer reveals secrets. Therefore, do not associate with one who flatters with his lips. You can simply say, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to listen. Now, if you are in a position where you are supposed to be responding with counsel, that's a different story. But it needs to be this has to be clearly defined, guys. If someone's coming to you and saying, oh, let me tell you what I just heard, then the intention is gossip. If someone is coming to you and saying, listen, something happened and I'm going to explode and I need to vent it out, or I need some advice, I need some counsel on what to do, then the intention is very clear, okay? So we're talking specifically about gossip, okay? If someone comes, you can say, I don't want to hear it. If you're looking for advice, I'll offer you advice, but I'm not I don't want to just gossip and share rumors and stories about other people. Number 3 is confront a gossiper. Some of you are non-confrontational, and for you this is makes you crawl up in a ball in a corner about confronting others, okay? But for others of you who are comfortable doing confrontation the right way, the gospel talks about, our Lord actually talks about in Matthew chapter 18 verse 15 to 17 how you confront someone who sinned against you or against another. He says you go and confront that person in order with the purpose of restoring them, not with the purpose of exposing them. And then if that doesn't work, you bring a witness. And if that doesn't work, then you bring them to the church. Okay? So you can very comfortably say, listen, I know you've been sharing this or talking about this person, and I don't, as your friend, as your sister, as your brother, I know how destructive this can be. And I want to encourage you guys, if you know gossip is happening here at church, I give you full reign, confront it, please. Confront it. Because I know how destructive it can be. And I know as we grow, it can only become harder. And we have to have a very clear sense of how we do things as a church, as a family. We're establishing a culture where we're saying gossip has no part and no place here. Okay? Obviously, as you confront, do so with sensitivity and gentleness. And if you need counsel on how to do so, please talk to me. Okay? Number four is if you are a person who loves to gossip, if it's that tasty morsel, you just enjoy it so much, confess it. The challenge with gossip is that people will oftentimes confess theft or adultery, even murder. But with gossip, people want to redefine what it is, because it's a really hard one to give up. Okay? So be able to confess your sin. And number 5, and finally, is watch the tongue. Okay? Watch the tongue. Ask Christ to put a guard over your mouth to protect your tongue. In Matthew chapter 12 verse 36, it says, "But I say to you that for every idle word men may speak, they will give account of it in the day of judgment." Every idle word that we speak will give an account. And in Ephesians chapter 4 verse 29, "Let no corrupt word proceed out of your mouth, but what is necessary for edification, that it may impart grace to the hearers." Imagine that. Our words can either cause destruction, division, hurt, pain, wounds, or it can cause grace and healing and restoration and life. So when I say watch your tongue, do so in a way that you're not like walking around fearful. No, like say, I want my words to be words of grace. And I need to consider every word that I speak, if it's causing destruction and division through gossip, or if it's looking to edify and build one another up. All glory be to God forever. Amen.